This is absolutely a peak work among monster horror films, and it is also one of the few most worthwhile Cthulhu movies to watch. The scene where a woman sitting on the toilet is eaten by a monster still scares me from using the toilet to this day. And the scene where a man is digested by the monster and then spit out remains an indelible childhood shadow for many people. It is Deep Rising, which premiered in 1998. The story begins in the South Pacific, in an extremely dangerous sea area where, for hundreds of years, countless ships have mysteriously disappeared, and the reasons for these accidents have sunk to the bottom of the sea. Even today, no one knows what happened, but still, many ships daringly pass through this area. This luxury cruise ship, worth $500 million, makes its first voyage to this mysterious sea area, carrying many renowned individuals. Under the passionate speech of the cruise ship builder, Simon, the atmosphere on board reaches a climax. However, immersed in revelry, the people do not know that a terrible disaster is quietly approaching. Different from others, this woman wearing a red dress seems somewhat out of place. She grabs a glass of champagne and fixes her gaze on the captain in the crowd, then deliberately bumps into him. The woman's name is Trillian, and her purpose is not to flirt but to steal the wallet from the captain, using the cards inside to open the safe and steal the treasures of the wealthy. But this little trick has long been seen through by the captain and Simon, who caught her red-handed. It turns out Trillian is an international thief. Before boarding, Simon had already obtained her information, and then Trillian was locked in a storeroom. Because of this decision, her life was indirectly saved. Shortly afterward, a figure stealthily enters the control room of the cruise, takes out a disc from a box, and hacks into the cruise control system, causing the cruise to lose power instantly, and the communication system is also completely paralyzed. Just as everyone is in a state of panic, the radar suddenly detects a giant unknown creature rapidly approaching the cruise, and in an instant, it crashes directly into the bottom of the ship. The severe impact causes the ship to shake continuously, and the previously lively hull suddenly plunges into chaos, with countless people falling from high places and dying on the spot. People scattered in fright, and a serious stampede occurred along the way. A woman took the opportunity to hide in the toilet, naively thinking she was safe, but suddenly a huge suction force appeared in the toilet, dragging her alive into the sewer. Not far from the cruise, on the sea, a small boat is rapidly approaching the cruise, carrying a group of extremely vicious criminals planning to rob the cruise. But Captain Finnegan is unaware of this because he was only renting the boat to these criminals to earn some freight money. But before the small boat reaches its destination, it collides head-on with a lifeboat that had fallen from the cruise, causing a hole in the boat. Although after some rescue efforts, no greater disaster was caused. The engine was severely damaged, meaning they could not continue forward. Fortunately, Finnegan's assistant discovers the cruise parked not far away. Perhaps they could go there for help. Learning that the cruise is nearby, the criminals no longer pretend and immediately point their guns at Finnegan and his assistant, revealing now that their purpose is to rob the cruise in front of them. But they do not know that a terrible incident has happened on the ship, and using the high-tech products they carry, the criminals easily open a side door, then fire a grappling gun and successfully board the cruise. But when they forcefully enter the lobby, they find the place in disarray and see no one around. Although the bloodstains on the ground suggest that a terrible disaster might have occurred here, had someone gotten there first. Just as everyone is puzzled, the elevator doors behind them suddenly open, but aside from a lot of blood, they see no one. They go outside and find that the lifeboats are still there. Where have all the people on the ship gone? The boss, Kevin, senses that they cannot stay long, so he decides to immediately split up. He takes a few people to the vault to loot the money. The remaining two take Finnegan and his assistant to the lowest level to the engine room to find parts for repairing the small boat's engine. But just as Finnegan and his assistant are engrossed in their work, one of the criminals suddenly hears an unusual noise. Curious, he goes over to check it out alone, only to discover some movement in the water. Before he could react, he was dragged away by the mysterious creature. Finnegan and his assistant are dumbfounded on the spot, while the other criminal thinks they killed their teammate. He reports the situation to Kevin while warning them not to make any sudden moves. But before he finishes speaking, he too is dragged into the water by the unknown creature. The two immediately feel a sense of doom and quickly grab the parts and run, with the monster in hot pursuit. Fortunately, they manage to close the hatch door just in time. On the other hand, Trillian, who was locked in the storeroom, wakes up from unconsciousness, completely unaware of what has happened outside. Using a hairpin to short-circuit the lock, she successfully opens the door. Not giving up, Trillian heads back to the vault to continue stealing the jewelry she had not managed to take earlier. However, before she could open the vault door, Kevin and his men arrive at the scene, finally seeing a living person. The rough Kevin immediately goes up to Trillian and grabs her by the neck, demanding to know what has happened here. Trillian is also unclear about the situation. While the two are talking, one of the criminals takes the opportunity to steal the card from Trillian's hand and eagerly opens the vault, expecting to find a wealth of jewels. Instead, he is met by Simon, who had been hiding inside, and mistakes him for a monster, killing him with an axe. The criminal decisively shoots, instantly killing several survivors hiding inside, with only the captain and Simon escaping the massacre. They quickly explain that there is a monster on the ship and urge Kevin to leave with them. Meanwhile, Trillian takes advantage of the chaos to quietly slip away, heading downstairs in the elevator. But just as the elevator doors open, she runs into Finnegan and his assistant, who are being chased by the monster. Realizing there is a monster below, Trillian decides to follow them upstairs. However, while on their way up, the elevator doors open again, and they encounter Kevin and his men, leading to an immediate standoff. Kevin immediately demands to know the whereabouts of his men, but Finnegan explains that they have been eaten by the monster, which Kevin refuses to believe. As the confrontation continues, the elevator suddenly begins to shake violently and begins plummeting rapidly downward, finally stopping at the lowest level. Fortunately, everyone is unharmed, but as they step out of the elevator, they see an unimaginably horrifying scene. The corridor is littered with fresh skeletons and the walls are smeared with terrible bloodstains, sending chills down everyone's spine. Suddenly, sounds come from the end of the corridor, and they see the incredibly sturdy cabin doors instantly twist and deform. What kind of monster has such terrifying power? As the monster rapidly approaches, Kevin and Finnegan resolutely open fire, but to no avail. The bullets have no effect, and the monster becomes even more enraged. They retreat into a room and fight as they withdraw, managing to close the door in time. Meanwhile, the observant Finnegan notices that Simon and Kevin seem to have known each other before. At this point, Simon no longer conceals the truth and confesses everything to the group. It was he who had hired Kevin to raid the cruise ship. Because building the cruise ship had exhausted all of Simon's savings and he had also taken on significant debt from banks. But unexpectedly, the daily operational costs of the cruise far exceeded expectations, leading to a financial deficit that made it impossible for him to repay the bank loans. To prevent the bank from repossessing the cruise ship, he decided to go all out, planning to join Kevin in using torpedoes to sink the ship and thus claim a large sum of insurance money. However, they had not anticipated that a monster would suddenly appear. Upon hearing this, the captain is filled with rage and immediately starts fighting with Simon. But everyone fails to notice that the monster has entered the room. Suddenly, a few drops of unknown fluid fall on the assistant, and he turns around in shock, nearly scared to death. The monster, which had remained elusive, finally appears. Without a second thought, Finnegan immediately opens fire, but shooting the monster has no effect. The monster then spits out a living person, who is the criminal that was previously swallowed. However, his body has been severely corroded by stomach acid, and he soon falls to the ground, completely dead. This blatant provocation enrages everyone, and they open fire on the monster in fury. The powerful gunfire effectively turns the monster into a sieve, but this creature not only withstands the punishment but also appears in surprisingly large numbers, almost omnipresent. The group is forced to scatter and flee in different directions. During the escape, Trillian finds Finnegan and tells him that as long as he brings her to safety, she is willing to do anything. Just then, a tentacle appears unexpectedly, startling Finnegan and causing him to fall to the ground. However, strangely, the tentacle does not attack Finnegan. It seems to only be able to locate its prey by sound. Realizing this, Finnegan tries to pick up the dropped weapon, but the noise alerts the monster to his location. Just as the monster opens its cherry-sized mouth and is about to pounce, Trillian appears just in time, fires several shots, and manages to drive the monster back. The two then quickly leave the scene. Meanwhile, the captain, who had been caught by the monster, finds himself in dire straits. Finnegan and Trillian try to intervene to rescue him, but the monster's strength is overwhelming, leaving them helpless to only watch as the captain is devoured by the creature. Once again, the group consolidates and opens fire on the monster, but the next second, the creature vanishes. Realizing that they cannot continue this way and that they are likely to be doomed, they decide to leave the cruise ship immediately. However, the path they must take is flooded with seawater. Finnegan and Kevin lead the way, with others following close behind, but the team member at the back is caught and dragged away by the pursuing monster. Before being eaten, he bravely pulls the pin on a grenade he holds. One of the criminals, not wanting to continue risking his life, decides to stay behind and wait for rescue. Forbidding anyone else from leaving, he prefers to be caught by the police rather than becoming food for the monster. Finnegan, unwilling to just wait to be caught or killed, decides to return to his own boat to escape. In a moment of heightened emotions, a thug points a gun at him, but just then, everyone's attention is abruptly drawn to something terrifying behind the thug. It's the monster. Having caught up, realizing the danger, the thug turns around and immediately fires his gun, successfully forcing the monster into an air vent, allowing the others a chance to escape. Despite this, he does not follow the others but stands his ground, boasting of his achievement. However, his celebration is short-lived as the monster suddenly reappears behind him and devours him in one bite. The others also encounter obstacles while fleeing, as the monster seems to intentionally herd them towards the ship's bow. With nowhere else to go, they reluctantly proceed forward, but during this time, Simon quietly leaves the group. When they reach the bow, they discover it to be the monster's dining area. The missing wealthy individuals are finally found, but only as a collection of skeletons, a shocking sight that leaves everyone dumbfounded. Suddenly, a massive influx of seawater surges in, accompanied by the monster's roaring sound, prompting them to flee once again. Amid the chaos, they once again become separated. The monster sets its sights on Kevin and the assistant. As the tentacles get closer, Kevin shockingly shoots the assistant in an attempt to use him as a distraction to gain time to escape. Driven by a strong will to survive, the assistant quickly ducks into a nearby small room, narrowly escaping a gruesome fate. Limping, he reaches the lobby, where he picks up a handgun from the ground. Just as he catches his breath, Kevin unexpectedly grabs him from behind. Using all his strength, the assistant manages to break free, only then realizing that Kevin's lower half has been consumed by the monster. He initially thinks to just walk away but stops after a few steps. Showing kindness, the assistant hands the picked-up handgun to Kevin, intending to help him end his suffering. However, Kevin not only rejects the help but also tries to pull the assistant down with him. Fortunately, the shot misses. Knowing he has no chance of survival, Kevin prepares to shoot himself, but discovers he has no bullets left. Kevin ultimately meets a tragic end, dying in agony. On the other side, Finnegan and Trillian finally make their escape. Unfortunately, during their flight, Finnegan loses the parts he had managed to secure. Just then, they spot an island not far away. Seizing the opportunity, Finnegan quickly comes up with an escape plan. Although the small boat's engine is damaged and cannot sustain long travel, it can still move a short distance. The two return to the boat, with Trillian heading back to the cruise ship to find a speedboat for their upcoming journey to the island. While Finnegan stays on the boat, using the criminal's torpedoes, he sets a course that will automatically crash into the cruise ship, planning to blow up both the ship and the monsters together. But as Trillian finally finds the keys to the speedboat, Simon suddenly appears with a handgun behind her, threatening her to hand over the keys or face consequences. Reluctantly, Trillian complies. However, even after obtaining the keys, Simon does not plan to let her go, naively believing that by eliminating all witnesses, he could still claim a massive insurance payout after returning. At the critical moment, Finnegan arrives just in time, but he does not intend to kill Simon, only to scare him away. Just as the two are about to leave, the entire hall begins to shake violently, and a horrific roaring sound follows. The monster finally reveals its true form, appearing as an enormous Cthulhu-like octopus. Confronted with this behemoth, the two stand frozen in place. Stunned, is this creature truly from this planet? They initially plan to sneak away while it's distracted, but the monster suddenly attacks Finnegan, its tentacles tightly wrapping around him. As it lifts him to its mouth, prepared to enjoy its meal, Finnegan pulls out a hidden weapon and shoots the monster in the eye, inflicting significant damage. The creature struggles and releases him, allowing them to rapidly leave the scene. They drive away on the speedboat, but their exit is blocked by the monster's tentacles. They search for another way out, with the tentacles relentlessly pursuing them. Meanwhile, Simon also spots Finnegan's boat and sees that it has been started. He decides to leap onto it, but the impact breaks his leg, barely managing to endure the pain and reach the cockpit. He finds he cannot control the boat because the speedboat's course has been preset by Finnegan. Helpless, Simon can only watch as the speedboat crashes into the cruise ship. A massive explosion instantly sweeps across the ship, but in the nick of time, Finnegan and Trillian manage to escape. As they land safely on the sea, the $500 million cruise ship and the monsters within it are completely obliterated. As the two drive the speedboat to the island, dawn breaks, but to their utter surprise, the assistant, incredibly lucky, also survives. It turns out that in the last second affected by the explosion, he also jumped from the ship and managed to find a surfboard. As the three discuss how to survive on this isolated island, a terrifying roar suddenly comes from deep within the island. Then, a swath of trees is instantly obliterated, and the film ends abruptly there.